Are you sick and tired of hearing me trying to come up with the perfect intro for this video? Well, fear not, I have hired the most trusted advisor of all time. It's called ChatGPT, and yes, it came up with this intro itself. ChatGPT is an AI tool that can be great help when it comes to answering questions, generating ideas, writing code, and yes, even crafting YouTube intros. And guess what? We can also use ChatGPT to make our lives easier inside of Google Tag Manager. So join me as we explore 10 ways to use ChatGPT for tracking implementations inside of Google Tag Manager. It's gonna be a wild ride, folks. Let's do this thing. I would never say this. All right, first up, obviously, ChatGPT is really great in answering questions, and we can ask it any question we want. For example, if we wanted to know the steps how to integrate Google Tag Manager, on a website, but we could also say a Shopify website. And let's see what it gives us back. So here we have the result, and it gives us actually a step-by-step guide on how we can implement our Google Tag Manager on our Shopify store, with even going into the theme liquid file and then pasting the codes in that we see. We can always ask a follow-up question because ChatGPT actually understands the context of the previous question, and you can utilize this for so much more, answering client questions, for example, or if you want to get a step-by-step guide on how to track certain things, that is what you can put into ChatGPT, and it writes you the answer right and there. Not everything is always correct, I must say, but in most cases it gets a really good idea, and you get really cool ideas as well in order to find more information, for example, on the web or in our videos. Which brings us to our next way to use ChatGPT. It can actually also write custom code for you, and obviously inside of Google Tag Manager we use a lot of custom HTML, but where would you actually use this? Well, for example, if you ask the question, how would I track a copy event inside of or with Google Tag Manager? Obviously, the more specific you can be, the better answer you might get. All right, so here we go. It gives us a very lengthy answer, and it doesn't actually write us any code just yet, although last time it did when I tried this out. So you get different answers when you ask a second time. And we have here, you need to click on triggers on the left-hand side, and then a new button, trigger configuration, custom event, and then event name field that you use copy. But where do we actually get it? We need to have a custom JavaScript listener for this. This is something that it just completely skipped, and I'm gonna ask him about it. So what would be the right custom HTML I need to deploy inside of GTM to make this actually work? And voila, it gives me a answer back, this time with the actual custom HTML that I would have expected in the first answer. And it tells me what I need to do because there's a custom copy event that will be pushed into the data layer. So I'm going to copy this code and actually try it out. Let's go into Google Tag Manager and click here on a new custom HTML tag that we want to implement. And here we go. We call this custom HTML for our copy event listener. And as the trigger, we'll just take all pages from here, save this and preview it. And now on our page, let's go ahead and copy something. And we get a copy event inside of the data layer. And we have this information available. You would now need to take this, build a custom event trigger. Then you also would need to create a tag that would send then your data over. And then obviously the different variables in order to have that data available inside of Google Tag Manager. But this did it all correctly. But you know, sometimes you might copy some HTML out of the internet, like for example, right here. And I'm just going to copy this, put this into Google Tag Manager. It should be kind of the same code, but it looks a little bit different. And I'm just going to save this and preview it. And it gives me these errors. Now, ChatGPT is actually great on helping you out with errors as well. And we can copy this line here and put it as an input into ChatGPT. You can put input right here. And right as the first one, actually something we also would need to have our code that we have just copied. So I'm going to go back here to our data, copy that as well. Let's put that into our request. So what should our request look like? So I wrote, I got this error in Google Tag Manager about my custom HTML tab. Can you correct it? Let's see if ChatGPT is smart enough to correct this code. And here we have the answer. It actually explains the error, why this error occurred. It gives me new code that I can try out right away. And I can see that this is probably the right code. It got rid of the error function, and it also got rid of the const keyword, which are not in the standard of the JavaScript that Google Tag Manager wants, and there are new versions, so to say. So here we go, and let's save this. And apparently this time it goes through just fine. So ChatGPT can help you to solve JavaScript errors by providing the input and asking him what the error actually is and correcting it. Next up, let's go into the triggers here. And you might be familiar with a popular trigger called the element visibility trigger. And here we have a selection method for the actual element that you want to track. So the CSS selector is something that is very powerful, but how do you actually use it if you don't know CSS? Well, ChatGPT can help you out as well. So if you go to our demo shop and let's say we wanted to track a certain element, let's say this basket icon here, let's inspect this element. And we can easily copy it. Just copy the HTML element and let's provide this as an input. And before that, I will say, write me a CSS selector for this element. So it doesn't actually give me just one answer, but 3 codes here that we can use. These are actually already written in CSS form, so you would need to only utilize this one at the front here. This is the CSS selector, and it gives us different variations of this. If you wanted to have the link element with the card contents of the class card contents, but we could also make it more specific with the span element or with the smaller than symbol that will give us the direct children of this if there are multiple things on the page. And you can try this out. And actually a great starting point for exploring this even further. You could also copy the whole HTML and say, I want to specifically have this element here selected. How would I do this? Make this more broader, make this more specific. It's actually a really great tool to get to the right CSS selector inside of ChatGPT. And obviously also then you can try this out in Google Tag Manager on this selection method, but there's actually also, if you remember, inside of the filters option of a trigger, there's also matches CSS selector where you would use this option as well. You need to know CSS for this, and ChatGPT can help you out. Another popular option inside of these matching options is regular expression. So let's say you have many different URLs, just like these here, and they're the input for your filter. And now you want to filter out only one specific one, and that's this one. You would need to describe it a little bit. So this is the only URL that would have the file in a parent folder, and only one parent folder and not 2 parent folders as it's the case here. So how would we select this one? Well, we can just ask ChatGPT. Let's give these URLs to ChatGPT and then write our prompt above that. In these URLs, write me a regular expression that matches the only file with only one parent folder. And I misspelled regular, but ChatGPT is very forgiving for typos as well. So let's see what it comes up with. And here we have the result. It doesn't only give us the regular expression that we should use, it also gives us a very thorough explanation what these characters actually mean, but then also why our one or the other URL doesn't match our criteria. So let's actually try this out inside of our little regular expression 101, which is a great tool. Let's paste it in and see. Well, we had a pattern error right here. Here it says unescaped delimiter. Let's ask ChatGPT to correct this actually for us. Please correctly escape the characters in the regex. I don't really know why I said please here, but let's see what it comes up with. And here we have the output again, and this time it seems to be correctly escaped. So let's copy that into our little tool here and see what it comes up with. Well, it only matched our target URL right here because this one doesn't have multiple folders as a parent and only one parent folder, and this is the file. This happened on the second try here. Sometimes you need to probe the machine a little bit in order to get the right output that you want, and you need to kind of know still what you are doing, unfortunately. Otherwise, you won't be getting the questions right and don't know how to troubleshoot errors as well. But let's move on to another use case here that I came up with, and this actually goes into what we have done with RegEx already. We can go to the variables here and create a lookup table variable. Now, a lookup table variable, I think it's great sometimes when you are creating content groups, for example. So I'm going to go with a regular expression variable. And let's say we would create here a page URL, and we would enter our pattern here and then the output. Now, what if we had many different URLs and would like to match certain URLs? First of all, we would need to have many URLs. I have copied here from our store all of our different URLs from our demo shop. And let's say we wanted to create different categories out of these URLs. So as an input, I'll provide this as an input and then write my prompt up here. Create 5 different categories. Let's see what it gives me back. So here we go. It gave me 4 different categories actually. One for e-commerce pages, one for contact pages, marketing pages, and then GTM resources, which is interesting. Now we have the URLs here, but this is no good when we want to put this into a lookup table variable. So I'll ask it to write me a regular expression that I can use inside of my lookup table. So here it randomly stopped with number 3. Well, let's try out these. So we have our regular expression here, which we could fill into our pattern for our regex table. And so the first one was e-commerce. The second one was contact pages. And the third one were marketing pages. And this is a lookup table variable for our content groups. Let's save this and take a look. All right, so we are here on our homepage, and that homepage is of the variable lookup table undefined. Why is that? Okay, maybe you should have a fallback as well. Let's go to a product page here and see. Now the lookup table says e-commerce, so the regular expression worked and put it into the right category. Let's go into a contact us page and see, okay, the lookup table is undefined. So probably it didn't do a good enough job inside of that one. And we had this goal one. What is with the goal one? That's also undefined. So gives me good information here, but I would probably need to debug the lookup table variable, why it's not working correctly, and why we have this problem with not categorizing the right ones. So you cannot always trust the machine. Here it also doesn't work. But I think it's a great starting point for making up content groups if you like them, and then working off the regular expressions that you can use in order to create a lookup table variable. Next up, obviously, when you are on a e-commerce store, for example, and you're working with a developer, then oftentimes you need to have a data layer installed in order to get the right product information into the data layer. What you can ask ChatGPT is to come up with an example. So for example, write me a data layer with these values. And I have something prepared here just in a spreadsheet with our key and our value. I'll paste that in and let's see if it comes up with a good Google Tag Manager data layer. And here we go. We get our code output. I'm actually super impressed because not always does it do this line where it looks for the data layer, and if it's not there, it will create one. That is not always the case in the examples that I've looked at least. And we see it's a data layer push. The event is form submit. The form ID is 2. It actually puts this in as a number, not as a string. And then the form name is contact us. This is the information that I've provided previously, and it's now put into this. Now, what you can also do, and this is our next use case, is to manipulate data layers with this. So you can actually ask it to implement data into the data layer. So we could say, add the key version and the value new to this data layer. So here you can see it created the data layer and added a new key and a new keyword in here as a value. And that is how you can manipulate data layers, and you could manipulate even more data layers. So let's come up with a more complicated data layer, like a Google Analytics event tracking one. So here we go, we get a data layer for a transaction event. This is actually a data layer push for the old version of Google Analytics, Universal Analytics. I found that GA4 stuff doesn't quite well work yet. You cannot ask for a GA4 version of it. The data set is limited to 2021, so nothing current. And I guess the adoption wasn't as high yet, as the machine didn't quite understand the context here just yet, that this is actually outdated by now. And the interesting part here is that it gave me a valid transaction data layer with a products array, transaction products right here. And this is perfect for our next example, which is writing custom JavaScript variables. Because oftentimes back in the days with the Facebook Pixel, we had to go in and, for example, create a list of SKUs that were bought. This is not always the case anymore, and oftentimes we have templates now available. But if you wanted to write a custom JavaScript variable to pull out certain elements and put them into an array, for example, how would you describe this? Let's ask ChatGPT. So I wrote create a GTM custom JavaScript variable that returns an array with all the products SKUs of this data layer. So let's see if it understands the context and if I described it correctly. And then let's see what's the output. So here we have it. Here is the little function that it came up with. First of all, I would recognize that it is actually a Google Tag Manager JavaScript variable, custom JavaScript variable, because it has this anonymous function up here, which is looks really great. Then it doesn't use a variable for the data layer, so it doesn't get a data layer variable, but it uses the window object and then the data layer directly, which, yeah, wouldn't be my preferred form of doing it, but might as well work. And it then goes into the purchase event and tries to find the items, transaction products, and then pushes the SKU into the products SKU. So this is the function. Let's try it actually out. I'm going to copy this code and put this into a custom JavaScript variable. And I'm going to preview this. And what I'm going to do additionally is to take our data layer here, which is our data layer push. And we're also going to try that one out by going into the JavaScript console and just pasting that in here. All right, we had a JavaScript data layer push with the purchase. And then in the variables, we have our custom JavaScript variable, and it actually takes out from our data layer the product 1 and product 2 SKU and puts it in an array, which we could send over to Facebook, for example. So this was done correctly, although the JavaScript was a little bit weird, but apparently it works, and ChatGPT can also write custom JavaScript variables for us. Which brings us now to our last way to use ChatGPT's abilities for our tracking deployment. And this is a special one, especially when we work with tracking. We have tracking requests that actually get sent over to our tools. So if we go over here to measureschool.com, we have many different requests that get sent over to our tracking tools. So I'm going to go over to our network request here to actually see which requests are being sent over to the different tools. So we have obviously a collect call from Google Analytics, and this is the collect call. There is a request URL that is being sent over to our server-side instance of Google Tag Manager, and we are going to copy our request here. So this is the request URL, and put it into ChatGPT. Copy that in. Forgot the H at the beginning. And then I'm just going to ask it to decode this tracking request for me. And let's see if it can understand the request and what it actually means. Now, in real life, you don't really know what all of these tracking requests mean, as they are decoded inside of the string. but with the help of ChatGPT, it will let us know what this actually means. So V, for example, the V parameter stands for the version of the measurement protocol that is being used, which is 2. And it goes through all of these different parameters that are actually hard to decode for a normal human being. Obviously, we usually utilize different extensions, such as the Google Tag Assistant, or we utilize the GA debugger in order to read these requests really easily in the console. But if you don't have these tools installed, you can just ask ChatGPT what these all mean, and it will give them back to you. There's actually, this is a Google Analytics request, which it looked at pretty thoroughly, and it understands what it's actually doing. So the tracking ID, this is Google Analytics, and so on. We can also now look at other tracking requests. So let's go into Measure School and look at a Facebook pixel request. So Facebook has Facebook events, I think, is it? Yeah, Facebook JS events. And, oops, no, Facebook. Here we go. We have here our Facebook tracking request. And let's actually go ahead and copy that value and also try it out in ChatGPT. And voila, it does the same thing. It recognizes that it's Facebook, and it decodes the different parts, like the ID, the EV is the event name or value is page view. There is a dataLayer DL parameter, which is the page path, so the URL that's being tracked, the referral URL, a flag indicating whether a pixel is tracking inside of an iframe. In this case, the value is false. So this is also interesting. This one is very interesting. The account name of the Facebook pixel, in this case, the value is TM-Simo GTM web template, which probably we are using the web template of Simo Ahava, and therefore it is somehow decoded into the query string as well. So that is something that Facebook also tracks and is being sent over to Facebook servers. And then obviously we also have our pixel ID, and obviously the session ID is also encoded right in here. So really useful information. I didn't even know this. When it comes to tracking requests and debugging them, you can put them into ChatGPT. You could also ask follow-up questions. For example, is there e-commerce data in there? So here's the answer. It does not appear to have any e-commerce data in this request. You could validate your e-commerce request through this little method and hopefully get the right answer back. I don't know how sophisticated it is on this end, but it's very promising to see that it can decode requests and makes a whole lot of difference when you are debugging requests. All right, these are my 10 ways that I came up with to utilize ChatGPT in combination with Google Tag Manager. Obviously, there are many more other use cases out there. I'd love to hear from you. If you came up with something cool, let us know the prompt down below. And if you want to learn more about Google Tag Manager, then check out our videos right over here. Well, this has been it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And my name is Julian. As always, until next time. And this was not written by ChatGPT.